Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on fun combos for every hero. Abaddon's Curse of Avernus will grant its attack speed bonus to every unit attacking the same target, and in the case of Lycan, that can mean an entire zoo. Getting on top of them is the difficult part, but that's why he was born with a haste rune on a 90-second cooldown. The default method of dealing with unstable concoction is to run into the trees and dodge vision as soon as he begins charging it up. But thanks to Bounty Hunter's track, that no longer becomes an option. And as a bonus, the Alch player will rarely have to suffer the 3.2-second stun of shame whenever he's unable to find a target. Global abilities in Dota are amazing by default, but when you stack them, you can do some truly unethical things. Pair up Zeus with an Ag's Refresher along with an Ancient Apparition, and you'll be able to take supports from 100 to 0 from all the way across the map. Anti-Mage is famous for removing his opponent's ability to have fun by sucking all their mana in the lane. Lion has a very similar reputation, and when you combine them, you can make sure that your magic wands will stay on 0 charges for the first 10 minutes. One of Undying's biggest fears is dropping his Tombstone in the middle of a late-game teamfight and immediately getting it blitzed by a bunch of ranged cores. But drop down an Arc Warden bubble on top of it, and that will no longer be a concern, because for some reason, buildings, which includes Tome, are immune to MKB. Axe and Lich make a fantastic lane for a few reasons. The first is because Frost Shield allows him to tank a ton of damage from a tier 1 and begin diving at level 3. Then when they come back, you can use Sinister Gaze to pull them into the middle of the wave, have Axe use Call, and start the process all over again. Landing those big fat juicy 5-second arrows is the most fun you can possibly have as Mirana, and Bane makes it so you need absolutely 0 skill to pull it off. Use Nightmare on a target, use Arrow from the right angle, and suddenly you can turn any lane into a grinder. This shit is so broken that it wound up ruining an entire 2.5 years of competitive Chinese Dota. Marcy and Batrider make for quite a gruesome twosome in the laning stage, and between Suplex and Flaming Lasso, you can start holding the enemy carry for ransom like never before. When it comes to zoo heroes, my opinion has always been the more the merrier, which is why I recommend picking up Chen and Beastmaster in the same comp. Not only will you be able to start taking tier 1 towers at 3 minutes into a match, but the debuff from Penitence also applies to all of Beastmaster's units. If you're playing against players who are particularly mentally deficient, you can do a really fun combo with Riki and Darkseer. Once he gets permanent invisibility, you can put an Ion Shell on top of Riki and have him follow an enemy hero around, waiting to see how long it takes for them to notice. Phoenix and Brewmaster can be an insane laning combo that can end an Agi carry's game before it even truly begins. Fire Spirits are a very consistent way to launch Cinder Brew, and if they have an enemy hero that's particularly good at killing the egg, you can always use Brewmaster's Cyclone to take them out of the fight. Bristleback is a hero who's extremely limited by his mana pool, but Chakra Magic can solve that problem on a 12-second cooldown. The cooldown reduction also means that you can use it to jumpstart the Quill stacks by using 2 in quick succession. Broodmother and Dazzle have a couple of obvious synergies, but the funniest of them all is setting up Shadow Wave bombs with all of those spiderlings. Send them all on an enemy hero, and then cast Shadow Wave to suddenly deal 1500 physical damage out of nowhere. Thanks to his illusions and their 100% damage output, Chaos Knight can deal an unholy amount of physical damage to a single enemy target. The best way to improve that damage is to reduce all of the enemy's armor to nothing, which is why Elder Titan makes such a good combo with CK. Clockwork and Dark Willow is a rather strange support duo, but the two of them combined can solo kill pretty much any enemy target. Clockwork's cogs will keep them in place for Bedlam, and Dark Willow herself can use Terrorize in order to force them to run into the cogs over and over again. Once the mid-game rolls around, Nyx Assassin really needs a +1 in order to take out some of the tankier targets on the enemy team, which is exactly what Dawnbreaker can always be. Skulk around in Vendetta, and then once the Dawnbreaker ult circles begin to appear, it'll already be too late for whichever poor target you've chosen. The next one is a bit of a triple threat, because a Huskar at exactly 1 HP is an absolute menace, and between Dazzle and Oracle, you can keep him that way for up to 15.5 seconds straight. One of Death Prophet's biggest problems is that she's a ranged hero who is weak to kiting, but if you're able to give her bonus movement speed and tons of HP with Lifestealers Infest, it solves all of those issues. Plus, it solves the issue of Lifestealer himself not being able to hit towers so good. Nagazyron's ultimate is infamous for ruining many a teamfight, but Disruptor is able to make amazing use of it. Wait for the end of Naga ulti, and you'll be able to set up a perfect ultimate with as many enemy heroes inside kinetic field as possible. When it comes to Grimstroke combos, very few heroes can match the insane utility of Doom. Not only that, but he also makes amazing use of Inkswell, making for a potent offlane duo. Dragon Knight and Jakiro, or as I like to call them, Vanilla and French Vanilla, are both amazing at hitting towers. With both of them on your team, your slow siege for a tier 3 will last all of about 12 seconds. If you want to deal the most physical damage as humanly possible for a Dota 2 team, go ahead and pick Vengeful Spirit, Luna, and Drow Ranger. The laning stage might feel a little silly, but once everyone has their auras online, you can start critting for 400 damage at 15 minutes into a game. One of the most frustrating things as Bloodseeker is using Rupture on a mobile target and they suddenly get smart and decide to stop moving. Earth Spirit's Boulder Smash will no longer let that be an option. If you're playing against a melee-heavy lineup, Winter Wyvern's ultimate will bring them all together like a very tight burrito, making it easy as pie for Earthshaker to land a 5-man Echo Slam. Just be sure not to get too excited and pop it before Winter's ult is over. Valve has spent the past 5 years kicking Ember in the shins every number patch by increasing his mana costs, but thanks to his extremely low cooldowns, Caudle can both solve his mana problems and basically give him a refresher orb on a 12-second cooldown. Enchantress can sometimes struggle with catching up to enemy heroes and laying into them with impetus, but a nice Chronosphere from Faceless Void will keep them all in a good position, where Ench's naturally long attack range will allow her to rain pure damage on anyone unlucky enough to get caught in the jar. If you want a Wombo combo that will instantly win you the game no matter what's on the enemy team, look no further than Enigma and Elder Titan. Between Earth Splitter and a Black Hole, it's anyone's guess as to which hero will get the rampage. This one is a classic. Land a nice Chrono as Faceless Void and wait for Cataclysm for Invoker to wipe out the enemy team. Sure, they might have an Aeon Disc or two, but that's why you both bought Refresher. Necrophos is also part of a very nice Soulbind combo with Grimstroke, but this one has something a little special to it. Reaper Scythe is the obvious synergy, but Deathseeker will also send out multiple pulses whenever Necro uses it, so be sure to pick up a shard early and start racking up those Sadist stacks. Don't tell Tiny, but Io's best friend is actually Gyrocopter. Between these two heroes, you'll be able to start clearing out the jungle extremely early on and turn Gyro into an unkillable raid boss. Now, while no one is happy to see that their support duo consists of a Hoodwink and Pugna, even I must admit that these guys make a very terrifying kill combo. Hunter's Boomerang and Decrepify will both boost the amount of spell damage being dealt to the target, so use both, pop both ultis, and watch as the enemy hero either dies instantly or over the course of several pathetic seconds. The most obvious way of dealing with Phoenix Egg is to blast it with ranged attacks, but when Mars activates Bulwark, 70% of them will be directed to him, basically making the egg impossible to kill. Juggernaut and Crystal Maiden are two of Dota's most iconic heroes, and for very good reason. The first time you lane against them with a combination of Frostbite and Blade Fury, you will never forget the insane PTSD it gave you. Lina is a magical nuker whose very short cooldowns are balanced by her need to constantly spend mana all the time. Caudle can help her manage that, and knowing his personal tastes, this is actually a very in-lore combo. One of the weaknesses of Kez's kit is the fact that it is almost entirely physical damage, but thanks to the armor reduction of Slardar, he can actually turn that into a strength. Missing either Ice Path or Macropyre is very embarrassing on Jakiro, but if you pair him up with a Kunkka and his X marks the spot and Tauren combo, you can deal an insane amount of magic damage while also stun-locking an enemy hero for around 7 seconds straight. This one is another classic offlane combo, because even if Legion Commander has an awful lane, Skywrath Mage's ultimate will secure every duel for the rest of the game. Leshrak's Aghanim Scepter ability Nihilism has some of the highest grief potential in the entire game, but by applying a Ghost Scepter effect to all enemy heroes, it also guarantees that Tombstone will be able to stack up a few zombies, turning it into an actual buff for his teammates for once. Fun fact, the bonus damage from Tag Team applies to any enemy heroes even if the ally hitting them isn't within the radius. This means that Lone Druid, between himself and the bear, can wind up dealing double the bonus of any other hero. The days of Gas Station Pugna may be far behind us, but Lion is able to do one hell of an impression when paired up with a Medusa. By pumping her full of mana, he'll be able to keep her invincible for almost the entire game. If you have a Meepo on your team, I strongly recommend picking up a Winter Wyvern, and there are 2 reasons for this. The first is because it eliminates the possibility of Meepo himself having to play into Winter's curse. The second is because by using Mega Meepo, he's able to make up for your awful cold embrace, picking up the Meepo that you froze and walking around with him as if you never fucked up in the first place. Monkey King and Mars both have the primary feature in Teamfights of putting big, beautiful circles on the ground, and by combining them, you can create Dota 2's equivalent of Mickey's Dick Smasher. Omni and Morphling make an amazing pair for several reasons. First off, they're a great pairing of a bulky melee hero and a somewhat fragile ranged one, making for a great safe lane. The second is because Morphling is an amazing user of Repel. And lastly, the Morphling can go down to 1 HP for a single cast of Purification to bring him up to full. When Largo first came out, people bent over backwards trying to use Croak of Genius on heroes like Zeus and OD, but in reality, we should have been using it on Muerta, because it affects Pierce the Veil, making an ability that already does an insane amount of damage even worse. Not to mention, the movement song helps deal with her kiting issues. Whirling Death is able to do an additional amount of pure damage based on how many trees the ability cuts along with the enemy hero. By combining it with Sprout, Timbersaw can start dealing 500 pure damage on a combined 12-second cooldown. When people think of Grimstroke synergies, they usually think of very powerful single-target spells, but I think Night Stalker is sort of underrated as a buddy for him. It's an amazing combo in the lane, and when Night Stalker casts ulti, Inkswell on him is a license to be a moron. Ogre Magi and Queen of Pain are both famous for their extremely high duration damage over time spells. Combine them both, and the enemy team may not ever be able to use their blink daggers. OD and Mirana are such an insane combo that it might just force the enemy mid laner to pass themselves away mid-match. Use Astral Imprison, and then, when they get out of gay baby jail, a 5-second arrow will be waiting for them. One of the more frustrating parts of playing Pangolier is when you're in the middle of Rolling Thunder and the enemy team is able to dodge you like a bunch of matadors. Mars Ultimate makes it so they have no place to run, allowing you to bowl them over as you please. If you'd like to pick up a 4-digit GPM without playing as a hero who rhymes with Schmalchemist, you should probably pick PA with a Magnus on your team. She has amazing use of Empower, and with the right farming route, you can be fully 6-slotted at about 30 minutes. Back to the Rupture combos, and there will be more of these. Fun fact, Primal Beast's ultimate is that when he lifts the opponent up, the Z-axis movement actually counts for dealing damage with Rupture. So it'll deal a ton of pure damage, and then when it's over, they'll get silenced by Bloodright. Sand King absolutely loves causing an insane amount of chaos with his circles on the ground in a team fight, and with Puck able to drop down Dream Coil, the enemy will have no choice but to take it all to the face. When it comes to Pudge, the best thing you can have on your team are understanding teammates, but if you can't have those, you might as well have a Rubik. With a little bit of communication, Levitate can make for very easy hook combos. Usually I'd recommend Chen, but they patched that out a little while ago. Muerta's innate means that she can always attack enemies who are ethereal, meaning that the Pugna player no longer has to worry about griefing their carry by casting Decrepify. Razor's Damage Suck is one of the most annoying spells in all of Dota, and Shadow Shaman is able to keep an enemy hero in place for it to suck as much damage as possible. Combine it with Eye of the Storm for a basic guaranteed kill on almost any squishy target. Ringmaster's ultimate can be hard to use effectively because it's difficult to force your opponents to look a certain way in Dota. Keeper of the Light, however, with Will of the Wisp has the best one in the game. Throw it out on top of Ringmaster ulti and watch as the entire enemy team is both ravaged and Laguna bladed. Phantom Lancer's ultimate Juxtapose has a natural limit on how many illusions he can create, but if Shadow Demon's Disruption is able to make PL clones, that limit doesn't apply to them, so you can completely clog up the screen and immediately die to an Earthshaker. Anti-armor strats are a great way to make sure the enemy team isn't having any fun, and two of the best heroes for this are Shadow Fiend and Slardar. Between Corrosive Haze, Presence of the Dark Lord, a Desolator, and an AC, enemy heroes will have their armor reduced by 37, meaning they will die to a single Daedalus crit. Shadow Shaman is exceptional at keeping enemy heroes still for quite a while, and Ursa is able to take full advantage by stacking up Fury Swipes. If Jug CM isn't available, this is your next best bet for a grinder lane. This one is very complicated and extremely unethical. You should know that Silencer's Arcane Curse has its damage over time effect paused whenever the enemy hero is silenced. You should also know that, with the Old Blood facet, Bloodseeker gets an 8-second long silence at level 1. Combine the two and the enemy laner will suddenly be affected by Arcane Curse for almost the entire lane, driving them to the jungle at level 2. The attack speed buff from Bloodlust will allow Slark to begin accumulating Essence Shift stacks faster than ever before, and between Pounce and a lucky Fire Blast, the enemy hero won't be able to run away regardless. Gobble Up combos are some of the best ways to grief your friends, and Shadow Fiend is one of my favorites. Pick up an Aghanim Scepter with Snapfire, shoot him into the enemy backline as he's charging his ultimate, and suddenly you've turned Shadow Fiend into a hydrogen bomb. Cyber's biggest weakness is his frail bitch body, but Centaur Warrunner with an Axe is able to solve that problem very easily. Pick it up, throw Sniper in the cart, and take him on a world tour, dealing an insane amount of physical damage the entire time. Spectre and Zeus make for another hell of a global combo. By combining both of the ultimates, you're able to pick off an enemy hero like clockwork whenever both of them are available. You know what's even scarier than seeing one giant blue ball of death come towards you at Mach speed? Seeing two giant blue balls of death come towards you, which is why Storm Spirit and Spirit Breaker can make for such an amazing ganking duo. Now this is absolutely overkill, but Sven's insane cleave and ridiculous damage can be boosted to an absolute ludicrous degree by Magnus's Empower. He may not make the most use of it, but when you're one-shotting the entire enemy team in a single Daedalus crit, you'll owe me a comment of thanks. Once Techies picks up an Aghanim Scepter, combined with Monkey King Ultimate, you can make for an amazing circles on the ground combo. The enemy will be forced to run away, blowing up the entire time, or sit there and be beaten to death by monkeys. To be honest, I'm not sure which one I would choose in real life. It can be very frustrating seeing a Terrorblade with Metamorphosis walk up to your tier 3s and knowing that you have a very small window to kill him before they drop. Shadow Demon will make it so that that window doesn't exist by using Disruption to copy Terrorblade illusions and sending them in instead. I wrote a little bit about how hard it is to find synergy stats in Dota. Feel free to read it if you like. Now Tide and TA, quite obviously, make for a very fun anti-armor strat, but as many pro players will tell you, picking these two heroes actually gives you everything. Tiny and Magnus are one of the cheesiest offlane combos in Dota thanks to both Skewer and Toss. Have the Tiny approach an enemy hero, throw him to the Magnus, and then skewer them under tower, even though they were under their own just a few seconds ago. Defense Matrix can be an extremely annoying tool when you're playing against a Tinker, but throw Living Armor on him and there is no way you're killing him before he gets that Blink Dagger off. Now Troll Warlord pairs well with a wide variety of supports, but I think Omni Knight might just be the best. Degen Aura makes it so that they can't run away when combined with ranged whirling axes, and very few heroes can make as good of use of a Repel, meaning that you can show up as Troll before buying a BKB, truly the hero's greatest fear. This one's another circles on the ground combo, but unlike the others, you can start doing it at level 2. Throw down Pit of Malice and Frog Stomp and they'll be unable to escape the Firestorm, burning their ass cheeks off. There's not much of a synergy to this, but if you pick Viper and Venomancer, there's a decent chance someone on the enemy team straight up disconnects, instantly winning you the game. Now the obvious synergy between Visage and Clinks is being able to pop out of nowhere and deal with very tanky targets very quickly. But the real strength is being able to take down tier 4 towers in about 2 1/3 of a second. Now laning as Void Spirit can be a little bit tricky, but if you have a Spirit Breaker to show up every now and again and put the enemy mid laner on edge, it'll be a hell of a lot easier to win it. Plus, your mobility will make mid lane ganks look like Cirque du Soleil. Winter Wyvern and Warlock are a support duo who can absolutely dominate teamfights all on their own. Winter's Curse will set up an amazing area for Fatal Bonds and Golem, plus if you drop the suit below them, they'll be very slow by the time they get out of it. Windranger and Weaver are two heroes that you absolutely hate to see as your position 4, but they actually have a lot of synergy when they're picked on the same team. The vision and armor reduction from the bugs will allow Windranger to continue using her ultimate as her target dodges through the trees, and between Shikuchi and Windrun and the execute from Power Shot, any enemy heroes leaving the fight at low HP will suddenly find themselves getting ganked. Witch Doctor's Death Ward is already a broken ability, but it can be made even more of a war crime with Chen's Penitence. By targeting the Death Ward on the Penitence-to-did target, it will increase the attack speed, and with an Aghanim Scepter, that means even more bounces to all of his poor teammates. And one last Penitence combo to finish us off, because that works on Wraith King's skeletons, and that shit is very funny. In conclusion, Dota heroes are synergistic, and you should absolutely play them. Unlike many other competitive games, Dota 2 has never really developed an accepted culture of homoeroticism. I blame the Russians. Peace on planet Earth.